class because it's quite vast if we talk about all the three levels.
Oh,
Weekend?
yeah, the final would be on as in the next weekend. Okay, so it would be on Sunday. Okay, so
Okay.
Saturday we can have your the second revision class. So most of the items which are there, so they are generally from level one and level two, because these two sections are quite wide in terms of the various topics which are there. So they are more in level one and level two. Level three does not have that much topics there, right? So there are only two topics which are there. So KYC, AML, and then you've got your risk management and uh, and the one regulation and all that we did last time. So all those things are there, right? So today we're going to do the risk management. Okay, so that is the today's class, and then on Sunday, as in the next Sunday, not this Sunday, you would be having your final mock. So I hope everyone is comfortable, or because now you look at this is already July, right? So we wanted to finish it off in the month of June only, but unfortunately, uh, due to, as in one uh, of the other reasons and all, so it got delayed and all. So we need to be pulling up our socks and try to do it now as in quite quickly, right? So that's the reason I gave you heads up quite early when we were preparing, right? So you need to be ready for your final mock also, because final mock will not take much time. Okay, so that's how it is going to happen. Any concerns, anything that you have in your mind which you probably want to discuss before I begin with today's topic? I hope everyone is keeping good. Uh, and, and I look at the situation is also improving in Delhi. It is quite better compared to the number of cases which come on a daily basis, right? So I hope your dear ones are all are doing good in that sense. Okay. Okay. So I guess 1 second. There were few slides left in your as in the regulation, so we will first complete those slides and then we will start the risk management, right? Okay, so we had started with EMI regulation, right? So, and after this, we have got how many slides there? One, two, three. Okay, so there are two, three slides left. So we'll do it quickly. So, okay, so let's start with the reading first. Then we will be trying to understand the things written out there. So regulation is something wherein you need to read it a couple of times to be clear with what these regulations are all about. So that you are fully as an aware about what these regulations are, and at the same time, when you are actually talking about the regulations in an interview, so you're comfortable talking about it. So you will have to give a couple of reading to it. It's more about no sound. Am I not audible, guys?
Is it audible?
Okay, I
Audible,
guess.
sir.
Okay. So Siddharth, maybe there is an issue with your as in with your system. Okay. So let us start with maybe okay, Apurva. You you can probably read it out. Apurva is not there. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, fine. Go ahead, Apurva. Just read it out. Okay, but I guess there's some issue with your microphone. We're not able to hear you. Is anyone else able to hear her?
No, sir.
So Apurva looks there is some issue with your mic. No worries. You can try to fix it. I'll let me just move on with someone else. Okay, Ayushi. Ayushi, you can read it.
Yes, sir.
Oh, go ahead.
The European Market Infrastructure Regulation (EMIR) is a body of legislation for over-the-counter derivatives, central counterparties, and trade repositories. EMIR was introduced by the European Union as implementation of the G20 commitment to reduce systematic counterparty and operational risk and increase transparency in the OTC derivatives market. It was also designed as a preventative measure to avoid fallout during possible future financial crises, similar to the collapse that followed the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy in 2008. It establishes common rules for central counterparties, which interpose themselves between involved parties in a contract to serve as the focal point of each trade, and trade repositories, which collect and maintain all records of trades. EMIR requires the reporting of all derivatives, whether OTC or exchange traded, to a trade repository. EMIR covers entities that qualify for derivative contracts in regards to interest rate, equity, foreign exchange, or credit and commodity derivatives. It also outlines three sets of obligations, including the clearing, reporting, and risk mitigation of applicable products.
Yeah.
Entities that qualify for EMIR must report every derivative contract that they enter into a trade repository. They must also implement new risk management standards according to EMIR, including operational processes and margining related to their bilateral OTC derivatives. EMIR also covers trades that are not cleared by a central counterparty, and entities that qualify must submit all OTC derivatives subject to a mandatory clearing obligation to review. Counterparties must file reports wherever they enter into derivatives transactions in the European Economic Area or elsewhere.
Yeah. So this was the regulation which came after 2008 economic crisis, right? The financial crisis which happened in 2008. So after this financial crisis, it was thought uh, there need to be a strong regulation which can ensure such financial crises are not repeated in future, right? So with this objective, this regulation was made, and this was more to look after the European Union, right? So regulation which is going to regulate and monitor financial activities, all the trading activities, and all other financial services which are offered by the various financial institutions in Europe. So this particular regulation was more for them, and particularly this was for the OTC derivative trades. Given this was largely established or largely made out as an OTC derivative was a bigger culprit in causing this 2008 financial crisis. So the idea was to bring the OTC derivative contracts on a clearing like platform. Central clearing counterparties um, would be the parties who would take care of the clearing of OTC derivative as well. So that is what is mentioned there. If you look at each point, so this first point talks about it was the commitment of G20 member countries who came together, and they realized there need to be more operational, there's more transparency in terms of managing and dealing with OTC derivative market. So to build that the transparency, or to build that operational efficiency, you can say, they they um, they came together, and also the thought of bringing up such a regulation which can prevent financial crisis of the same nature which happened in 2008. Right, that's one. And then what it talks about two things, a couple of things, rather three things I would say broadly. One, the trades which are not OTC derivative trades, they either need to be cleared through the central counterparty, so there should be an exchange like model. So those central counterparty would be responsible for clearing those derivative trade. That's one, right? And if those and if those derivative trades are not cleared, then there should be more regulation around, or more more surveillance or supervision around those trades. And at the same time, all trades which are OTC exchange derivative trades, they all should be reported to a trade repository. So trade repository is going to manage, or is going to collate all the data which is under the umbrella of OTC market. So all the data would be captured by the trade repository, and that would be visible to the respective regulators in those European countries. So that was the broad idea of having this EMI regulation after this 2008 financial crisis. Okay, clear? Let's move on. So if you look at now here, we have got Bank Secrecy Act and Money Laundering Control Act. So what these acts are all about? So these were more from the US point of view, these acts which we are now reading. So yeah, who is next? Anyone? Gaurav, yeah. Go ahead, Gaurav.
Okay. The Bank Secrecy Act, BSA 1970. also known as the Currency and Foreign Transaction Reporting Act. The BSA was the first landmark legislation formed to prevent criminals from acquiring the origins of criminal proceeds through banks and other financial institutions. The law compelled financial institutions to cooperate with the government against suspect money laundering. The legislation also rapidly became a tool for tracking and intercepting terrorist funding. Still very active today, the BSA seeks to identify and track the movement of money and other instruments in and out of the US and between financial institutions, and therefore requires record keeping and reporting for individuals and financial institutions. Bank must submit a currency transaction report (CTR) for all cash transactions of more than $10,000, a threshold amount that has remained unchanged since 1917. In transaction of more than $10,000, a threshold amount that has remained unchanging since sorry. In addition, banks must identify and document the individuals and institutions involved in these transactions. The Money
Yeah.
Laundering Control Act,
Okay.
1986.
Hold on. Let's first do this one, because these two are a separate one, you can say, but they are somewhere interlinked, I would say. But let's first go with the Bank Secrecy Act, and then we will look at the other one. So here, what we are talking here is, this was very landmark sort of a regulation in the history of US, because this particular Bank Secrecy Act regulation actually came with the intention of preventing money laundering only. So this act had a lot of provisions into it, and thereby, as in by virtue of that, you can say the government officials could reach out to the bank and financial institutions to find more information which were pertaining to money laundering or financial crimes and all. Right? That's one which, as per this regulation, is there. And other is, if there is a transaction happening with a threshold of $10,000 or more, so such transactions need to be reported to the authorities in the USA, and in the form of currency transaction report. So that currency transaction report would be having a data of all those transactions which have got a threshold of $10,000 and above. So those were to be reported. Those are to be reported, you would say, to the authorities, and authorities can look at that. Authorities would look at that data, and they would see if they find something suspicious, something unusual. Then those authorities can further ask more detail with banks, or they may do their own investigation to look into those transactions, and accordingly reach out to those individual to find more on the back of those transactions if they look to be having any suspicion around them. That's one. That's two rather. And then bank would have to maintain a very strong documentation for all such transactions which are happening using their platform or using their financial system. Right. So that is what this Bank Secrecy Act has got into it. Right. So next is Money Laundering Control Act 1986. So you would find some of these acts are just an extension of Bank Secrecy Act. Somewhere you would say these are the extension to Bank Secrecy Act only, because the information are largely, it's largely overlapping. Okay, Gaurav, you now continue with the Money Laundering Act 1986.
Okay, sure. The Money Laundering Control Act 1986. The Money Laundering Control Act of 1986 made money laundering a federal crime and aimed to encourage foreign cooperation towards eradicating the drug trade. Additionally, the law set reporting requirements for payment transmission of more than $10,000, not limited to cash transaction. Stiff penalties and forfeiture, meaning there could be seized whether or not anyone was charged with a crime. The law also compelled banks to follow the maintained BSA reporting and record keeping requirements.
Yeah. So with this particular act, more emphasis was given to follow the same strict regulation around the world, and that is with the help of with the network of other countries, right? So this was the idea behind this particular act, wherein it was extended to the other countries, and it was requested with the other countries to look at money laundering as a serious crime, and so the international cooperation was required, and that is one to eradicate the money laundering and also the other crimes which are happening under the rise of those financial transactions happening across the globe. So that talked about reporting requirement for a payment of more than 10,000, right? Or maybe not in only in the cash form, it can be in the check form, in the draft form also. So in any manner, if there is a transaction happening uh, between one entity to another entity or one person to another person across the world or across different countries, so those transactions need to be reported. Those transactions found to be having any relation with the money laundering, then there would be stiff penalties applied on those people who are were involved into those crimes and all, right, and at the same time, the property and everything can be seized if people involved or indulge in these as in you know these heinous crimes or financial crimes, I would say, are found to be guilty. So all those provisions were there under the Money Laundering Control Act. At the same time, it was, and the more emphasis around the reporting and record keeping was also put in here, and that has got more of an. If you look at the 1970 Bank Secrecy Act, you will find some of the overlap or some of the similarities there. But if you look at here, this is more emphasis was given for the cooperation, international cooperation under this 1986 Money Laundering Act. So, and then even it talked about transactions which are happening in the payment form or maybe in any other form, right? So that can be in the form of gift which is being given to one party to other party, or it can be draft, it can be check. In any form, the transaction is happening, which is about $10,000. So those such transactions one need to be reported, and if there is something found to be related to money laundering on those transactions, then stiff penalties and all other provisions of seizing property and seizing property of the individuals or the people involved into those financial crimes uh, would would, would be available, right? So this is what the money laundering control act is all about. Any question as of now? Anything not clear? So now final two slides will do. Okay, so now we have Lavesh. Yeah, go ahead. Lavesh is there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Lavesh. So you want to read?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
It is Anti-Drug Abacus
Hmm.
Abuse Act 1980. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act 1988 was enacted as a part of the U.S. so-called War on Drugs. The
Hmm.
act amended the Bank Security Act in expanding
Yeah.
the definitions of financial institution to include auto dealer and real estate entities who were
Hmm.
thereafter required to disclose the transaction of is required for any monetary instruments that have a value of more than $3,000.
Hmm.
The Annunzio uh, Waived Anti-Money Laundering Act 1992, a response to
Okay,
a large international bank,
let's hold
began
on.
a hot. Yes, sir.
Navish, one second. Let's first complete this one. These are the separate acts, right? So let's go one by one. So let's first do the as in the Anti-Drug Abuse Act. So what this has got? So this was more focused on the drug activities which were there in the US, right? So that's the reason it's given there. It was war on drugs. It was war on drugs means the idea was to stop all uh, drug related activities
Minimize
which
the
were
use.
illegal. Yeah, those all illegal drug activities which were flourishing or which were happening in the US. So this act which came in 1988 was sort of to control or to stop or to curb those drug uh, nexus or drug menace, you can say in other words. So this act actually included the other entities or other institutions like auto dealers and real estate under the Bank Secrecy Act. So Bank Secrecy Act was already having, financial institution who was supposed to report transactions of the threshold of $10,000 or more. But under this Bank Secrecy Act, so extension was created, and even the auto dealers and real estate entities who were doing transactions, large sum transactions, and uh, even the transactions of as small as $3,000, which was being done between these entities, that was also to be reported, right? So verification of an identity is required for anyone using monetary instrument that have a value of more than $3,000. So here, so that one $10,000 was applicable for bank, right? So here even for other entities like auto dealers, real estate entities and all, if they are dealing, even they need to report for those transactions if it is of the amount of $3,000. So that was an additional step which was taken under this act, Anti-Drug Abuse Act, right? And that was of 1988. Okay, let's move on. Yeah, Lavish, next one.
Okay. The Annunzio Wiley Anti-Money Laundering Act 1992,
Yeah.
response to a large international bank being a hotbed of money laundering. The Annunzio Wiley Anti-Money Laundering Act 1992, the act raised the stake of for banks. The act increased penalties for financial entities found guilty of money laundering and encouraged rights agencies to consider revoking the characters of any financial institution involved in money laundering. It also instituted verification and record keeping for wire transfer. In addition, it withdrew criminal referral forms and introduced suspicious activity reports SAR, a tool for banks to report any activity they deem suspicious or of out of ordinary. Furthermore, the Act established the Bank Security Act Advisory Group BSAAG, comprising of public nominated financial transaction, non-federal regulator, law enforcement agencies, and trade groups. The BSAAG chair headed by the director of FinCEN, who advised the Treasury Security on BSA operational matters.
Right. So what this act was all about? So this act was more for
Sir,
the
आगे बढ़ो.
banks. No, 1 second, hold on. So let me just add on, as in just to elaborate a bit more so that everyone is on the same page and related what we're talking. However, these lines are very clear and easy to understand, but still I'm just uh, trying to put in my additional words so that we can have more time to read it out and also to understand it. So this particular act was more for the financial institution or for banks. So it was found the banks were in the center of these money laundering activities. When I say in the center of money laundering activity, that means banks were being used for money laundering, right? So in a sense, if some platform is being misused by people, a set of people, so it would be very difficult to find those set of people unless the central the central agency, or in a sense the bank who is providing a platform to those people, has not got strong controls to monitor, to capture those transactions which are happening through them. So this particular act actually put in more uh, more penalties on the financial institutions found guilty of money laundering activities, and they were also told to increase the oversight, one internally, and they were also oversight by the external agencies on financial institutions. And even after, you know, after having this act, if they were found to be constantly involved into these money laundering activity, or they do not put in place strong controls to stop activity of this nature, then there could be a possibility wherein the charter can also be revoked. So if the charter is revoked, that means their license is revoked in a sense. And they were also, under this act, they were also told to file a suspicious activity report. So wherever banks find any activity which is unusual, suspicious, out of ordinary, right, such activities were supposed to be reported to the agency, right? So that is what we have in this, right? And then at the same time, this particular act proposes to form an advisory group, that is the Bank Secrecy Act Advisory Group. So this advisory group was also formed under this act, and that was it was nominated by the financial institution, non-federal regulators, law enforcement agencies, and trade groups. So all those people would be nominating the advisory group as in people who would be part of the advisory group. And this advisory group was chaired by the FinCEN director. FinCEN is a financial crime agency which is there in the US. We talked about the FinCEN earlier, and this FinCEN director reports to the Treasury Secretary, right? Treasury Secretary of the US, which is quite a big position in the US. So right, so that is how this particular act was made in 1992 with an aim to put more regulation around the financial institution, and financial institutions should be blamed more, and they should have a higher stake in stopping the money laundering activity. So that is what is proposed, and rather I would not propose, it was mentioned or enacted, you can say, in a sense. Okay, yeah, Lavish, move on.
Yes, sir. The Money Laundering and Financial Crimes Strategy Act. Acha, ऊपर वाला. The Money Laundering Suppression Act. Where we have left this.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, this one.
The Money Laundering Suppression Act 1994 focused on encouraging banks to improve AML training, developing anti-money laundering examination procedure, and improve procedure for reporting suspicious activity to law enforcement. It also required each money service business MSB to be registered by an owner or controlling person to MSB and makes operation an unregistered MSB a federal crimes. MSBs includes any individual, whether or not on a regular basis, that deals in currency, chases checks or issue or cashes travels, check or money orders, as well as United States Postal Services.
Okay, so this was another act. So if you look at this act, they were coming one after the another. The first one in 1988, another one 1992, another one 1994, right? So why the acts were coming one after the another? So it's very obvious, right? So there is always a scope of improvement. There always a need to have a different thing to be added in the previous one. So the idea is to to fill in those loophole or to add in more things, so that the idea of preventing or stopping money laundering can actually be strengthened, can actually be implemented on the ground. So that was the whole idea why these acts were introduced one after the other, and they were sort of aligned to Bank Secrecy Act only. So Bank Secrecy Act as a whole was intended to stop the money laundering uh, in US and across the globe. So then there were extensions made after that Bank Secrecy Act, and others were added. So here the need was felt. Maybe the anti-money laundering training which are available are not of a good quality, which do not involve every every small detail which bank personals should be having knowledge of, right? So therefore the more focus was given on encouraging banks to improve their AML training and develop anti-money laundering examination procedures and improve procedure for reporting suspicious activities to law enforcement agencies. So all these aspects were included under this act, wherein one, the banks were encouraged to improve their AML training, and they were also told or encouraged, you can say, to develop some examination procedure for this AML training, which they were to give their employees, and also how those reporting suspicious activity, because this, you look at it in the previous law, the bank were told to report suspicious activity, right? Now here the emphasis was how they should be finding out, how they should be reporting those suspicious activity, how they are enabled or equipped to find the suspicious activity, and accordingly that can be reported to law enforcement. So that's what is talked here under Money Laundering Suppression Act. And then it also talked about all the money services business. So all the small to big businesses which deal into money, right? They need to be registered themselves, right? They need to be registered, or if anyone not registered, then that would be considered a crime, federal crime. So that is what. So and then there is a bit of a definition given what all would be called money services business. MSBs include any individual, whether or not on a regular basis, that deals in currency or cashier's checks or issues of traveler checks and all, or a money orders for that matter, right? So all these services, these can be government offered services also. If these are government offered, then they are already registered, we know, right? Government bodies, people who are working under the purview of government, under the purview of government offered services, they are already regulated, they are already monitored, so they do not need to be registered. Only people who are private, who are offering these services in a private capacity, they need to be monitored, they need to be registered. So that is what included under this Money Laundering Suppression Act. Fine, let's move on, Lavish.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Money Financial Crimes Strategy Act 1998, impacting both the and government agencies. The Money Laundering and Financial Crimes Strategy Act 1998 required the Treasury and other agencies to develop a national money laundering strategy as well as AML training of examiners. A part of this efforts include identifying geographic and industry sector at high risk of money laundering and leveraging the newly created high intensity money laundering and related financial crime area HIFCA task force to structure law enforcement efforts in high risk areas.
Yeah. So now, yeah. So this is again, there was another edition of another Money Laundering Act. So with 1998. So this was another act, Money Laundering Financial Crimes Strategy Act. So here, one this that it was impacting all the agencies. One, government agencies, another banking agencies also. So here emphasis was given to develop national money laundering strategy. National money laundering strategy was to be developed under this act. That's one. And also there should be some strong mechanism to assess the AML training for examiners. One is for the employee who are being trained on the AML aspect, right? Another is the examiner who are going to examine those papers who are written by the employees of the bank. There should be a training for the examiners also, that was mentioned here. And then it was mentioned, given the money laundering is has a different aspects in different zones or different regions, you can say. So it is more more geographic or area related thing. Therefore a special task force was designed to manage those high risk areas where the origins or the roots of money launderings are found very easily. So there are certain areas in the US or even across other Latin America and all. So there some of the parts were highly involved into money laundering and the other crimes, drug trafficking and all other crimes. So it was found the geographic areas and different other reasons also cause the spread of money laundering, and which actually become a hotbed for those crimes and those financial crimes, along with the other crimes also, like drug trafficking and all, which I said. So therefore this particular task force was designed to look after or support the law enforcement agencies in strengthening or in preventing money laundering in the high risk areas, or the areas where the risk of money laundering was higher. So this is what is talked here under this act. Okay, yeah, last one. Navesh, go on.
Okay, sir. The uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism act, USA Patriot Act 2001. Participated by the 9/11 Terrorist Act. Still, a third of the USA Patriot Act is referred to as the International Money Laundering, Abatement and Financial Anti-Terrorist Act of 2001. For the Act, one of its primary purposes is to increase the strength of United States measures to prevent, detect, and prosecute international money laundering and financing of terrorism. It criminalized terrorism financially, increased civil and criminal penalties for money laundering, and expanded the requirement of anti-money laundering programs and customers' due diligence process to all the financial institutions.
Okay. So this was this particular act came post to 2001 terror attack which happened in the World Trade Center and all, if you remember. So after this particular incident which happened in USA back in 21 September 9/11, which is called, it's written there, 9/11 terrorist attack, right? So after this particular terrorist attack, this US Patriot Act was formed, and here the emphasis and focus was to increase more penalties, or more of severe measures to prevent the money laundering acts. Money laundering was proposed or was given, and also that included the international money laundering and financing of terrorism. So if they find something was even from outside their borders, they could even prosecute and punish people who uh, were carrying out those money laundering activities from outside their country. Even they were also falling under this act. And then other due diligence processes were requested to the financial institution to strengthen at their side. That was the larger aim of this this particular act, which was made in 2001. So more of the penalties, you can say, was introduced under this act. And then another is international money laundering acts, which even were not directly perpetrated from their soil. If they having any of those activity even carried out from outside, they were also going to persecute such criminals. You would say how they're going to do it. That's a different matter of discussion, because they would definitely have to bring them in their own country. Then only the prosecution can take place. But that is all. Those provisions were made into it, and then the penalties and civil penalty, criminal penalties were actually increased under this act for already available. Those penalties were increased under this, and the due diligence was proposed. Customer due diligence was to be increased for the financial institution to prevent financial the financial crimes, all of the likes of money laundering and all. Okay, so moving on. Next, okay, Mahendra, you can read it now.
Okay. Under this law, when separate financial institutions attempt to combine, the federal banking agencies must review their AML records for compliance and factor in previous violations and subsequent remediation into their decision on approval or denial of the merger or acquisition. In addition to prohibiting financial institutions from engaging with foreign shell banks, it also encourages enhanced information sharing among government and financing institutions and demanded that banks respond to regulatory requests within 120 hours. Of a particular note, the Patriot Act required financial institutions to implement customer identification programs, CIPs, often referred to as Know Your Customer. These programs must verify a customer identity, maintain those records, and ensure they are not on any terrorist list.
Okay. So if you look at this particular act, so this was here the more emphasis was given to the KYC thing. More focus was given to the KYC process of the bank, which was not that robust or strong before 2001. Right. So under this law, when separate financial institutions attempt to combine, federal banking agencies must review their AML record for compliance and factors. So one is the merger is being said here. So if the two financial institutions are combining together, so the federal banking agency must review their AML record for the compliance and factor in the previous violation and subsequent remediation into their decision on approval or denial of the merger or the acquisition. So the federal agency would be looking into the the compliance and all other things, and why that merger happened, why the merger didn't happen. All those aspects would be covered by the federal banking agencies. So that is what was proposed under this law. In addition to prohibiting the financial institution from engaging with the foreign shell banks, it was also encouraged enhanced information sharing among government and the financial institution, demanded the bank respond to regulatory requests within 120 hours. So that was a timeline was given there. Timeline of 120 hours was given. So when banks as in there were certain banks who were making their shell banks, or in the other part of the world, and they were transacting in the name of the bank or having an arm of the bank in the other part of the world, and basis that they were able to capture a lot of client or customer who were in one way or the other involved into the wrongdoings or in the wrong kind of activities, right? So such shell banks were to be dismantled, and therefore there was a provision made into this law, that is Patriot Act. So if in case the agencies need any information from the financial institution about the shell bank transaction, they need to respond within 124 hours, 120 hours, right? That is another. And then they would need to have a customer identification procedure that we already talked about in our KYC process. So customer identification procedure, you know, is a risk-based approach and all those factors that we talked about. So that is what was introduced in this Patriot Act of 2001, and this is now it's in a part of the KYC process which bank does every time the bank goes with the customer identification program, right? So that is all those things were detailed or put in there in this Patriot Act 2001. Okay, Mahinder, you can go on now with the other one.
Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act 2004. The Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004 amended the BSA Bank Secrecy Act to allow the Treasury Secretary to require financial institutions to report cross-border electronic transmissions of funds. If the Secretary determines that such reporting is reasonably necessary to aid in the fight against money laundering and terrorist financing.
Right. So here the emphasis was given to all kind of cross-border, even one originating from US, another could be originating from one other country to another country. So this was introduced in this Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act. So the Treasury Secretary may ask about those remittals, those transactions or remittances which are happening from one country to other country, and to determine more underlying information under those transactions taking place, and if they find any suspicious activity in those transactions, they can further take those into their investigation, and further necessary action can be taken by them. Yeah, last one.
FinCEN Customer Due Diligence Requirement for Financial Institution, CDD Rule 2018. In 2016, FinCEN introduced and in 2018 enacted the CDD Rule, which amended BSA regulation, namely the Patriot Act KYC mandate, to clarify and bolster financial institutions' customer due diligence requirement. According to this FinCEN CDD rule, financial institution must abide by 4 core requirements. Number 1, identify and verify the identity of customers. Number 2, identify and verify the identity of the beneficial owner. Any individual who owns 25% or more of a legal entity, and the individual who control, manages or directs the legal entity of all legal entity customers, both foreign and domestic. Determine the nature and the purpose of customer relationship to develop risk profiles, and conduct ongoing monitoring to identify suspicious transactions, and on a risk basis to maintain and update customer information.
Right. So this is again an extension to the KYC mechanism proposed under the Patriot Act of 2001. So the 2001 Patriot Act mentions about the KYC process and the CIP program, customer identification program. So here the CDD, the customer due diligence, was amended, and they proposed certain order or certain way of doing the customer due diligence. So that was introduced under this particular act, and that specified the 4 points, the bullet point which is mentioned there. So this, around these 4 points, the CDD, the customer due diligence, should be focused on. So due diligence should be done basis the the identity and verifying the identity of the customer. Then the beneficial owners, because we know there are the shell companies open, and in the name of the passive owner, some wrong activities are carried out. So anyone who owns a 25% stake, even if it is as in the person is not an active participant or active member in that company, that person would also be considered a beneficial owner. And if something wrong happens or wrong is being done in the name of that firm or the shell company or any even genuine company, so then the action would be taken against people involved or uh, found to be doing any uh, you know any abused activities, or any wrong activities in a sense, right? So then determine the nature and purpose of customer relation to develop risk profile. So risk based approach that we covered in the KYC, that is what was proposed. And then the ongoing monitoring of the activity and transaction which are done by the customers is also. So these 4 points were emphasized under this 2008 regulation, which was an extension to the Patriot Act of 2001. Right, so here the due diligence proposed is more enhanced in a nature, you can say, is more strict, or more of the more additional information was put in under the CDD rule. That is what is proposed under it. So with this, we complete all the, our regulation thing is done. So I'll share this PPT if in case, did I share it earlier?
No, sir.
Let me share it, give me a second. Okay, so this is your this is the one for regulation and all. Let us now start with the risk management, the last topic that we have in your certification. Um, looks my this is still not working, or maybe I do not remember the password. So can anyone please share the user ID and password for LMS? Mm, yeah, 1 second. Let me just try it. Yeah, one. Okay. Okay. Okay, so this is these all points we are going to talk in this presentation, right? So what is market risk, credit risk, liquidity risk, business risk, strategic risk, reputational risk, systemic risk, operational risk, mitigation. So we'll not be going as in detail, but we would be looking at from the point of view like you should have some knowledge about these points, so that way so that you're not blank if someone is asking you about what is market risk. So you should have fair, if not fair idea, at least some idea, right? So that's the objective, you can say, of this presentation. Let's cover it. So what is risk? Any idea? What is risk? How would you define a risk?
Sir, uncertainty or chances of loss.
Right, right, right. So yeah, well said. Risk is something, uncertainty, yeah, uncertain, something which you not and maybe something which can endanger your already established purpose or already established mission. So if that is compromised in a sense, the your plan, so it is a risk, right? So the any exposure of any nature which would be considered a risk, right? It would be considered a risk. So can we say, in a sense, a risk is something which is inherent to every thing that we do? The everything that we do in those activities, risk is one component or one element which is inherent, right? Can we say it this way, or you can't say it? What would you say? So while you, as in, let's take a very practical example. So while you are maybe walking, or maybe you are going one place to another place as an individual, right? So is there any risk in that, or that's free of risk? Do you think that has a risk?
No, sir, there is risk.
There is no risk. Okay. What about others? I'm saying, like, you are going from,
Sir, there
maybe
is
say,
risk.
there is a risk. Okay. There is a risk. Who said?
Pranav.
Who said? Okay. And somebody said there is no risk.
Pranav.
Okay, now, and somebody also said, I guess there is no risk. No one? Okay, fine. Okay, so which kind of a risk is there? Which risk? When you say if you move from one place maybe to another place, there is a risk, right? So how do you foresee that risk?
Sir,
As in, what risk you see there?
sir, risk of accident.
Okay, okay, yeah, makes sense. Is it
Time
right?
delay, sir.
Time delay, right? Very nice. Yeah, time delay. Absolutely, absolutely. So now you have categorized risk. Gaurav said time delay. So time delay is also a risk, right? If you need to reach your destination within half an hour, and if you take an hour to reach your destination, so half an hour risk is there. So this is also a risk, and an accident, which Pranav said, is also a risk. So in a sense, every activity, no matter which activity you do, has got some risk inherent. There is an inherent risk, you can say, right? So that is how a risk is a possibility of losing something of value, right? So that's very rightly put it there. So anything which has got some value, or maybe in the sense of, that can be in the sense of time, that can be in the sense of money, whichever way you want to say, because value is not, you cannot determine value only in the monetary form. You can determine value in many other forms, right? The time is also value, right? It's a money, it's value. So all those factors are risk in every activity that you do. But now here we are more concerned about the financial risk, or the risk which are revolving around financial activities. So that is what we're going to cover here. Values can be gained or lost when they're taking risk resulting from a given action or inaction, foreseen or unforeseen. Risk can also be defined as the intentional interaction with uncertainty. Clear? Any doubt here? Anyone? Okay.
No, sir.
It's very self-explanatory. So the next here, what is risk management? So there are different kind of risk. Risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and controlling threats to an organization's capital and earnings. Right. So risk management is basically you're going to manage the risk. So what are you going to do? You're going to assess. First, you're going to identify the risk. Then you're going to assess the risk. Then you're going to control the risk, right? And then you're going to review on an ongoing basis those risks which are there in the system, right? These threats or risks, which risk could stem from a wide variety of sources, such as financial uncertainty, legal liabilities, right? And strategic management errors, accidents, and natural disasters. So all these can be the cause of the risk. All these can become a cause of risk in a system. So um, so these needs to be assessed, these need to be one need to these need to be identified, these need to be assessed, these need to be controlled, and then these need to be monitored or reviewed, you can say, on a regular ongoing basis, right? So identifying risk exposure, measure and estimate the risk exposure, assess the effects of exposure, then find okay, then when you identify the risk exposure, find instruments and facilities to shift or trade risk. So what here we are talking, if you identify a risk, there is another way you can transfer your risk, you can shift your risk. So how can you do that? When you say
Sir,
find instruments
like
and
use-
yeah, go ahead.
using less leverage.
Right. Or
Sir, like in case of Kingfisher Airlines has taken financial risk as well as operational risk, both of the risk, as in operations, they are not able to compete with their other competitors. And
hmm,
according to the financial risk, they have already taken a debt and have not does not
uh,
have the capability to meet their leverage.
okay, right. Hmm. Right. Yeah. Anyone else want to add something? Okay. So, right. So, operational risk and so when you say you can transfer your risk, that basically means you can hedge your risk, right? So, when you are taking a risk, so there is a various mechanisms, various ways by which you can hedge your risk, and thereby you need not suffer the whole risk. If you have hedged partly or fully, that depends upon the individual or the entity's capacity, that risk is transferred from your side to another side,
So
right?
like getting insured.
Yeah, getting insured is also a risk, right? So it's it's a hedge only, you can say. You're actually transferring your risk. When you have an insurance cover, you are actually transferring your risk to the insurance company. So that is kind of you have an instrument. With that instrument, you are able to transfer your risk to other entity or an individual, right? So but now when you do that, you need to assess the cost and benefit of the instrument. You're not just going to, because everything that you do would be having some ramification in the form of the cost, and those cost is something which an entity or an individual need to identify first before they actually go for transferring a risk to other players, right? So that is what is done, right? So then assess the effects of exposure. So that's then when you identify a risk and you see the risk is there, and you also look at your risk appetite. So you're going to assess, as when you say assess the effects of exposure, so you are actually assessing what can happen, if there is a risk, what can happen. Then you find a strategy to mitigate it. So strategy can be avoid, can be transfer, can be mitigate, can keep it, right? And evaluate according to performance later, like with the risk that you took, if that risk is in line with your expectation, so that is what you're going to evaluate. So one is avoid basically you do not take, when you say avoid, you do not take part in that particular activity which has a risk. If some activity has a risk, you don't even take part in the activities, so that basically means avoid. Transfer we have already understood. So transfer means you have a risk, you are actually taking a hedge position, you're transferring your risk to the other party. So that is your transfer risk. Mitigate is you build more controls, around it. So maybe you believe if you take another trade, so mitigate we are understanding. Mitigate basically means you are trying to mitigate, so you are bringing, you're taking maybe another trade, or you're building more controls around the activity that you're doing. So that control feature is called mitigate. You're trying to bring some arrangement or some mechanism which are going to reduce that risk or mitigate that risk, right? So that is you can say that's a control feature. Keep means you keep it in your system. You know there is a risk. You acknowledge the risk and you continue with the risk. So it is about the appetite of the entity and individual. So you know the risk is there, but you don't do anything about it. You just continue keeping those risks with you, right? So that's how this entire risk management process is looked at and managed with various companies. Okay. So risk management is how firms actively select the type and the level of risk that it is appropriate for them to assume. Most business decisions are about sacrificing current resources of future uncertain returns. With risk management and risk taking are two sides of the same coin. Together they drive all other modern economies. The capacity to make forward-looking choices about the risk in relation to reward and to evaluate performance lies at the heart of the management process of all enduringly successful corporation. Right. So risk management and risk are two sides of the same coin. Together they are driven. They drive all our modern economy. So so risk management and risk, these two things go hand in hand, you can say. And so how you make those choices, how you capitalize those opportunities which have got risk in them is the uh, individual choice one, and at the same time the individual has to further look at the various measures available to evaluate those risks which are there and accordingly find a better mechanism, a better way of dealing with that risk. So that can be in the form of mitigate, that can be in the form of avoid, that can be in the form of keep, that can be in the form of um, transfer. The four points that we discussed. So that is what is here. Now various other risks that we have, various kind of risk we have, types of risk is there: market risk, credit risk, liquidity risk, operational risk, legal and regulatory risk, business risk, strategic risk, and reputation risk. Now we're going to look at each one of them one by one, right, in the subsequent slides, starting with your and then again the financial risk is bit more here we look at the various risks. Then these two risks, which is one is the market risk, another is the credit risk. These two have a few more, few more thing into it. So this is how is explained here. So these two are the two important risk which we can further divide into various other aspects of the risk which fall under the same category. So when you look at the market risk, what all can be market risk? So equity price risk, interest rate risk, foreign exchange risk, commodity price risk, trading risk, right? And then you have a gap risk, and you can further have general market risk, specific risk. Similarly, when you look at at the credit side, when you look at the credit side, so you have a transaction risk, you have portfolio concentration risk, right? Then you have issue risk, issuer risk, counterparty risk. So all these kind of different risks are there, right? So these are the different risk. These are two risks wherein the nitty-gritties, you can say, of those different kind of risk is okay. What is gap risk? Anyone? It is more linked to trading only, because trading risk is clubbed with gap risk.
Sorry, is I'm audible?
Yeah, you audible. Go ahead.
Sir, gap risk is when the positions open in opposite direction. Like in a gap down, if we are holding some stocks, then it will be a gap risk there.
Right, right. Very well said. Yeah. So as I said that this gap risk, as it is clubbed with trading, you can very clearly see there it is clubbed. So, it has to do with trading only. So gap, when you are trading something, right? So there is a possibility where the markets swing from one side to the other side the very next day. And if that happens, so what will happen to your position? You're going to suffer a huge loss. So that gap, that huge loss that you're going to see in your, in your books or in your account just a day after, or maybe a couple of days after. So that kind of a risk is called a gap risk, where the market completely swing to the other direction, and which creates a gap in your position, a huge gap, right? So market at times open in a gap of few means 50 points, 100 point, right? If that kind of a gap is happening, so so that's a risk in trading. So that is what the gap risk is mentioned here, right? Any other point which you're not clear here? Any one of you? Portfolio concentration, what is this? Portfolio concentration, anyone?
So is it like investing the entire amount maybe in one area only? So the portfolio
Yes.
doesn't contain many things. Like if the funds are not invested in various parts, but they are invested into one thing only.
Yeah, right. That's right. So
The
yeah, you have.
funds which are invested into one sector or maybe concentrated into one uh, into a particular stock for even
Yeah,
worst concentration, and
right.
it is usually done to make a good speculative profit out of the market when one is
Hmm.
totally sure but about the movement, but it contains a huge risk as the portfolio will not be diversified.
Hmm. Right. Well said. So the concentration risk is there. Portfolio concentration risk would be there when you have invested, or there is a saying in English: don't put all your eggs in same basket, in one basket, right? There is a uh, very famous proverb, you would say. So it basically signify the same thing. So when you talk about a portfolio concentration risk, so if you continue investing in one of its kind, right? One of its kind, or one of its, maybe it can be one share alone, it can be one particular kind of asset class. So in various other way you can look at this portfolio concentration risk. It can be one particular share you're investing, or it can be one particular asset class you're investing into, not touching the other investment class. Like gold is an investment class, right? Debt is a secure fixed income instrument is an asset class. Equity is an asset class, right? And then you have derivative is another asset class. Forex is another asset class. So if you just limited your exposure to one kind of an asset, so that is a concentration risk. So that is what is there. Moving on. Okay, now we're going to talk about all those risks which were there, which were laid out here in this slide. No, here are there. Yeah, these we're going to look at these risk one by one now. Okay, so market risk is a risk that changes in the financial market prices rates will reduce the value of security or portfolio. The price risk can be decomposed into general market risk component and specific market risk component. These are unique to the particular financial transaction under consideration. In trading activities, risk arises both from open, unhedged positions and from the imperfect correlation between market position that are intended to offset one another, right? So one, when you look at market risk can be defined into two parts. One is your general market risk, another is specific market risk. So specific market risk, as we discussed, like the market risk which has to do with a particular market only. So that can be your equity market, it can be a particular asset class, it can be a particular kind of an asset, maybe the interest rate swap, maybe your credit default swap. So those are specific in nature. So it can be equity, it can be fixed income, it can be your, the various different asset class that is specific in nature. So when that risk is there, right, so that would be defined or categorized as a specific market risk component. And when the risk is bigger, which is impacting the whole market put together, so that sort of risk would be defined as general market risk component. So that means the entire market is gloomy, and no matter which asset class you talk about, it is impacting all different asset classes in one way or the other, right? So that is your general market risk component, and the specific market risk component is specific to one particular asset class of the market, right? So that is how these two components are different. In trading activity, risk arises both from open position and imperfect correlation between the market position that are intended to be offset one another, right? So when you are doing trading, the risk is there when you have your position open, unhedged position, right? So the risk would be there, and at the same time the risk will also be there when you are doing two trades which have a same kind of a correlation, right? Or imperfect correlation, you can use these words also. So ideally, if you are taking two trades and those two trades have got a different correlation, means if one goes up, another goes down, or another goes down, another and the other goes up, so it is an opposite correlation, or you can say a perfect correlation. This way you're going to hedge your risk, or you're going to not suffer losses, because your trade are having opposite correlation, so you're going to hedge your risk in that way. So okay, specific component risk. So what is the interstate risk? Right, simplest form of interstate risk is a risk that the value of the fixed income security will fall as a result of an increase in market interest rate, right? So what will happen? So this is a risk there in the market, and this we discussed in the fixed income chapter also, wherein if the market interest rate increases, what will happen? The value of those securities which are traded will fall. Clear, everyone? The value of the security, the price of security will fall because of rising market interest rate. So that kind of a risk will be clubbed under interest rate risk, because the fixed income securities will fall in its value due to market rates increasing. So this relation we already discussed in fixed income capital. That's what is put in here. Okay, now equity price risk. So you have risk in equity also. The price of equity may go up one day, the next day it may fall. So that is another risk that you have in the equity. This is the risk associated with the volatility in stock prices. General market risk for equity refers to the sensitivity of an instrument or portfolio value to change in the level of broad market indices. Right. So that is your equity price risk. Okay. Then forex exchange risk is also there. Commodity price risk is also there. Foreign exchange risk arises from the open or imperfectly held position in particular foreign currency, denominated assets and liability, leading to fluctuation in the profit or values as measured in local currency. So right, so FX risk is there due to change in the demand and supply of the currency, right? So that will have fluctuation in your local currency vis-a-vis the foreign currency, right? So that risk will be defined as foreign exchange risk. Commodity price risk. The price risk of commodity differs considerably from the interest rate and foreign exchange risk, since most commodities are traded in the markets in which the concentration of supply is in hands of few suppliers who can magnify price volatility. Right, so commodity price risk can be there, right, given the big player who have got the big position in commodity. If they try to manipulate or curve the supply of the commodity or control the supply of the commodity, then that price risk can happen in the commodity market also, right? So that's what is commodity price risk. What is your credit risk? Credit risk is a risk of economic loss from the failure of a counterparty to fulfill its contractual obligation. Yeah. Yeah. Any question?
So credit risk is
Yeah, go ahead.
ability to pay back. If the party is not able to pay back, then there is a credit risk.
Right. Yeah, that is right. Rightly said. So if the counterparty is not able to pay your money back, so it is defined as a credit risk, because counterparty has a probability of defaulting on its obligation. So such risk would be categorized as a credit risk, right? So that's what is given there. Liquidity risk. What is liquidity risk? Anyone?
Unable to meet the operational expenses due to lack of liquidity in your funds. For example, if you are having a concentrated amount of funds in illiquid asset like real estate, or even perhaps some type of shares which are also termed as really illiquid due to the low amount of trading in them, so your funds will be blocked and you will be facing a liquidity risk, and basically you won't be able to meet your operational expenses and even other contingent expenses which might arise.
Right.
Sir, low credit rating securities have the liquidity risk, as they are not liquid in the market, and no one wants to purchase the securities which are low at the credit ratings.
Yeah, right. So when we put our money, right, in any of the asset class which loses people interest, right? Maybe for short term, maybe for a long term. So that can become a liquidity risk, because even if you want to pull out your money from your investment, you may suffer loss, and thereby you would say a particular investment that you made in a particular asset class is not having enough liquidity, and therefore you are not able to square off your position or square off your position as and when you wish to do that. So it is more dependent on the market sector. So like the example of the real estate which you talked about. So if you put in your money in a real estate and real estate is not gaining momentum, or the people lose interest, people don't have interest investing in that given market or given area where you have bought a property or real estate for that matter. So there is a possibility the given real estate becomes an illiquid, right? So in a sense, if you categorize the liquidity risk is a risk wherein you are not able to manage liquidity. You don't have cash to manage your requirement. In other way, you can say that way also. You need cash today. You need money today. You don't have money. So that would be called a liquidity risk, right? So I need money. I have my investment in one asset class, and that can be, you can look at from the equity point of view also. You can look at the same from the equity also, right? So maybe you have invested in ITC when it was 220. Now the ITC is at 203 rupees. So if you have already put in your lot of money in ITC and now you want to pull out from ITC, then you would have to incur loss, and that is a liquidity, because that will that would be would be restricting you from making the decision wherein you can take that, book that loss, and then use the funds for the other purposes. So it is basically raise the necessary cash to roll over its debt. So you don't have money. So raise the cash means you need money. You don't have money. So you will have to redeem your money. You redeem some of the asset class or some of the investment that you have already made. So that is the example which I mentioned. You put in your money in ITC. ITC has fallen down. Now you want to pull out your money from ITC, but if you do that, you will have to incur loss. So here you're going to book some loss, and that booking loss can also cause liquidity risk, because if you book a loss of 1 lakh, so that means you are falling less in your liquidity. You don't have you minus 1 lakh. Yeah, right. So you can say that way you're not able to meet the requirement.
So, but that one would fall under equity market risk, the fall in share prices.
No, yeah, that particular feature will fall in equity, equity price risk for sure, but that is leading to your liquidity risk, isn't it? If you need money, maybe you want to invest money. Let's take an example. You need money for buying few more investment, and that investment can be in debt, can be in other segment also, in other asset class, and you were hoping while you made your investment in ITC that the ITC will move up, and thereby you will make money, and you would pull out your money. So that did not turn out as per your expectation. Now you still have this option. You can redeem your investment, but you're going to lose money here, and because you're losing money, you're falling short of liquidity. You need 12 lakh, you got 11 lakh because of the fall in the price of the equity that where you invested. The equity ITC has fallen 1 lakh in its value. And even if you redeem now the investment that you've done now, you can redeem that, but because of that less value, so that is it's a liquidity. So liquidity has got multiple facets. One, liquidity is the example that we discussed. You put in your money in something illiquid, and now you want to not able to square it off. That's the one part of the liquidity thing. Another is where you need money, you need margin, you need to have your like, let's take an example of the futures example, which is very clear to understand, very simple to understand. In future, you pay upfront money, right or wrong? Right? In future, you pay upfront money, and that upfront is your 25% of your total notional value of the trade. Let's take a scenario wherein you continue make losses on that trade. What will happen? You will you may break your maintenance margin also. What will happen then? If you break your maintenance margin, you would have to top it up to your initial margin. Now, is this not the liquidity risk? This is liquidity risk, because you're falling short of your money. Don't have liquidity means you don't have money. Meet cash, second point, meet cash, margin, and the collateral requirement of the counterparty. So this will also be called your liquidity. So liquidity has a, so Siddharth, hope it is clear now.
Yes, sir. Like you're saying, if I had funds, I would not pull out my money from ITC at a loss. I would wait for it because I was bullish and I am quite sure about the fundamentals of the company.
Right.
But due to the lack of liquidity, I'm unable to meet the obligation.
Yeah, you're unable to meet the obligation because of market behaving against you. And another example, the future one that we do, which I just mentioned. So in future, the trade that you take a leverage trade, right? So you just put in your 25% of the total notional money, and if this continues going against you, that means the value of that future trade comes below the maintenance margin. So now you need to top it up, or you're going to lose this trade. If you don't do that, if you don't put in enough money to top it up to the initial margin, so what the broker is going to do? Broker is going to secure off your trade in the market. So this is also liquidity, because you don't have money now. I don't have money. If I don't have money, that means I'm going to make loss, or I'm not able to continue with the with my, as in, I cannot continue with the requirement of the counterparty, because the counterparty, who is the counterparty here? It exchange clearing house is a counterparty. Clearing house is instructing me or with broker sending a message that I need to give more collateral, more cash now, and if I'm not able to give that cash, so I'm facing the liquidity risk challenge, and thereby I'm going to lose money. I'm going to lose my position on the trade which I made in the first place. So this is also another form of liquidity risk, you would say, right? So that is how the liquidity risk is placed there. Now coming to legal and regulatory risk. So legal and regulatory risk arises for a whole variety of reasons, and it is closely related to operational risk as well as reputation risk. So this there are various reasons of legal regulatory risk, and it has some, this is connected to your operational risk or the reputational risk also. The counterparty might lack the legal or regulatory authority to engage in a risky transaction. Legal and regulatory risk are classified as operational risk under Basel II Capital Accord. Right? In derivative market, the legal risk often only become apparent when a counterparty or an investor loses money on a transaction and decides to sue the provider firm to avoid meeting its obligation. Right? So what here we're talking when we are going in a trade with a counterparty, right? So we have a risk, the risk of counterparty defaulting. This is called your credit risk. When there is a credit risk happening with a counterparty, what would you do? You would like to have a legal team, and the legal team is the one which has a very strong and a minute information on how to deal with the counterparty on a legal terms, as in how to sue counterparty when counterparty is not adhering or acting on its obligation. If counterparty does not act on its obligation, then there is a legal requirement, and if you don't have that legal framework or the legal attorney or the legal department in your team, in your company, then it is a risk. So it is a cost also, it's a risk also, you can say. So that risk, a team who understands the nitty-gritties, the team who understands, the finer aspects of those complex deals which happen with counterparties. So that risk is what is there in the system, right? Another aspect of regulatory risk is the potential impact of change in tax law on market value of position. So, this is another aspect, you can say, of a regulatory risk is this, right? When you talk about various regulations, like if you are okay, just to make you understand regulatory risk, let's understand this analogy. Maybe if you're following news, on a daily basis, there is a very this tussle is going on between Twitter and the government of India, wherein Twitter is not appointing a legal, uh, the legal compliance officer who would be looking into certain aspect of content before that content is being circulated on the platform that widely and that easily. So anyone aware about this development?
Yes, sir, heard about it. It's been in news for a long time now.
Yeah, it's been in news for about as in it started from May, because May was the time when they were supposed to appoint a compliance officer to take care of this aspect of monitoring content, which is so that content is not, it is not every kind of content would not be monitored. It is certain aspect or which can have a ramification, wider ramification on the country, like in a sense something which is falling with antisocial element or a terrorism and all those things. Those are there few more things under this. So such things will have a strong compliance, and they need to appoint a compliance officer as a Twitter and all other platform. It is just not about Twitter, I'm saying here. All other social media platform like Facebook, WhatsApp, and all different, right? So they are supposed to follow this particular regulatory requirement. So this is a risk, right? Until few months back, they were not supposed to follow it. But now, given the regulatory framework has been changed, so this is what the regulatory risk is all about. So regulatory risk can change the the tax system, can change various other things. It may increase the margin requirement, like the SEBI has done for retail investor. Now the margin requirement is going to be 100% very soon, by the end of September. The 75% which has been made now is going to be 100%. So if you want to trade in any of the equity product, you're going to put in you're going to put in all of your money to trade into it. You cannot take leverage from the broker, right? So that is a regulatory risk. You would call it a regulatory risk, something which is coming in the form of regulatory, which is going to impact the market. So that kind of the risk would be defined as regulatory risk. Clear? The two examples that we covered here is one about the general one, the as in the Facebook and Twitter one that we talked about. Another is about the real one, the SEBI, which has done. SEBI has increased the margin requirement. So that's a regulatory risk, right? Okay, coming to business risk and strategic risk. Business risk, okay, let us probably take a 10-minute break now, and then we will be covering the rest of the slides. Fine, guys? Okay. Okay, so everyone there, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, so let's continue where we left it. Okay, so moving on to what is business risk and strategic risk, right? So as we discussed, risk is something which is inherent in every activity which we do. So business is also not untouched with the risk which it has got, right? So what is business risk? Classic risk of the world of business, such as uncertainty about demand for products, price that can be charged for those products, or the cost of producing and delivering products. So all these factors affect business. So these factors would be termed as business risk. So how, what would be the demand for those products, which you are manufacturing? Will that be consistent, and will that be same over the years or over the months? So these are few things which is always uncertain, and therefore uh, uncertainty can also be termed as a risk, right? Therefore you can say uncertainty is also a kind of a risk in every business, and uncertainty leads to various things. So the demand for products is just one of them. The price that can be charged for those products, right? So maybe it is lowered to increase the demand, right? And the cost of producing, so the cost of manufacturing or producing the product can be a challenge in future because of the increase in raw material and the various other things uh, involved in making that manufacturing product, right? So therefore all these points would be the business risk, you would say. What is strategic risk now? The risk of significant investment for which there is a high uncertainty about success and profitability, can be related to change in the strategy of a company vis-a-vis its competitor. If the venture is not successful, then the firm will usually suffer a major write-off and its reputation among investors will be damaged. So strategy, as the word goes, strategic risk basically strategy risk. Strategy, why you make strategy? You make strategy to increase performance or to make strong position in the market. So strategic decisions are made by the strategic leaders, as in the the top leaders, management in every organization, and at times those strategic decisions which are taken at the highest level may not may not fructify. That may happen. Those decision does not lead to a good amount of success, and therefore it will not have or will not create desired profitability, right? So those that kind of a risk is there, and that is called your strategic risk. You make a company, you make a very organized uh, organized plans that you make. Those plans do not work, and therefore you have a lot of debt. The debt which you took to run that venture did not work out, and therefore you will have to now manage that debt on your own, and it is going to kill your reputation also as a organization. It may hamper your reputation among your investors, and therefore so all these things will be clubbed under strategic risk. Okay, so what is reputation risk? Reputation risk is very simple to understand. Reputation risk can be divided into two main clauses. Enterprise can and will fulfill its promise to counterparties and creditors. Enterprise is a fair dealer and follows ethical practices, right? So in a sense, when you're dealing with your counterparty and you're not able to fulfill your obligation to your counterparties or to your creditors, right? So that is, it is going to uh, kill your reputation or going to defame you. So in that sense, your reputation will be at a risk, right? That's one. Then when you're dealing with your with your clients, you're not following unethical practices, that can also become a reputation risk. If you don't follow an ethical standard practices which are supposed to be followed, which are expected to be followed by an organization, then it may turn out to be a very implicating, cause of reputation risk. So the second main form of reputation risk took on a new dimension around the turn of the millennium, following accounting scandals that defrauded the shareholders, bondholders, employees of many major corporations. During the late 90s boom in the equity markets, so that particular the enterprise is a fair dealer and follows ethical practices. So while you can look at organization like Satyam. Right? Satyam is a very classic example of this particular non-following of code of conducts, right? Code of conducts or the right practices or the ethical practices. So that can happen by by misusing the accounting methods. This accounting is there to keep control of all the financial activities in which a financial firm or in which a company, be it a financial or non-financial, is dealing into, as in how they're dealing into. So that accounting method can be flawed one, and if that flawed practice is being followed by an organization, so you can say the organization is not fair in dealing with its shareholder, with its clients, with its stakeholders. So that may further lead to a reputation risk. A reputation will be tarnished with these practices, and that will have further ramification in the long run on the company doing all those wrong practices, right? What is systemic risk? Anyone has any idea about it?
Risk related to an entire economy, which might affect all the sectors of the economy. That might be financial or automobile or any other sector, and like it's like something which is not under the control of the organization. It can't be diversified.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well said. So bang on. That's systemic as a word. Systemic is mentioned. It's a system risk, right? So which is not possible to diversify. It is connected with one company with another company. So if there is a problem with one organization, that problem may extend and can also cause a problem for another institution, be it a financial institution or non-financial institution, right? We're not just talking here with the financial institution point of view. It can it can cause a problem for the other company also. So then, this will become a domino effect, or you can say chain effect. Domino means a chain effect. So that means one institution may create a chain effect, sort of a problem, wherein it can become a bigger problem, which can cripple, which can demolish the entire system, right? So that sort of a risk is defined as systemic risk, wherein maybe a one too big to fail institution fails, right? Too big to fail is a statement we use for a system which is really, or company which is really big. If a company of that nature fails due to any reason, so that will be having larger impact with the other entities attached with it, and such kind of failure will have very huge impact on the other connected companies as well, and therefore it may turn out to be systemic risk, wherein one falls and the other falls, the other falls, the third falls, the third falls, the fourth falls. So that means it may become such a huge problem that it can cripple the whole system, and therefore we have termed it as a systemic risk. Okay. Operation risk. What is operation risk now? A potential loss resulting from a range of operational weaknesses. That includes inadequate system, management failure, faulty controls, fraud, human errors, right? In banking industry, operation risk is also often taken to include natural and man-made catastrophes, other non-financial risks. Right. So operational risk is both the oldest and the newest threat faced by financial and non-financial institutions. Banks have to protect themselves from key threats to their operations, such as bank robbery, and white-collar fraud. So, in short, I would say, like, if you focus on these major risks which an operation has, other than this, you can say the natural disaster can also be termed as an operational risk, one of the operational risks for sure. So inadequate system, you understand the systems which you are using to carry out your operation is not functioning properly, is not working properly. So that's an inadequate system, you could say. Management failure is something which failed at the management level, so that is a management failure. Faulty control, so control system that you have put in place. So like if your one transaction is booked by one individual, it needs to be reviewed by another individual. That's a control you have, and that control is not effective, then that is a problem. Fraud, someone is doing wrong with wrong intention, so that is fraud. So human errors, mistakes can happen. Those would also be clubbed under operation risk. The natural disaster and all other, like earthquake and all those other natural calamities which happen. So those will also be falling under the operational risk only, because they hamper the operation, and if something is hampering the operation, so that would be called the operation risk. Okay. So types of operation risk is again given here. People risk, you can incompetency, fraud, process risk, model risk, transaction risk, operation control risk, and systems and technology risk, and external events example given actually. So you can broadly categorize your operation risk in 5 points. One is people risk, process risk. Process risk can further be categorized into model risk. Model means the method, or you are valuing a security basis a certain model. So if that model is not working or the model has got some problem into it, so that is a model risk. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Any question? Okay, fine. So I hope it's simple to understand because it's just an extension to what we discussed here. It is just given with bit more information there, right? So factors causing operational risk, we have partly covered it already. Increasing complexity of financial instrument, greater dependency on information system, lack of familiarity with new financial instrument, misuse of financial instrument, mispricing, ineffective hedging, operational errors in data feeds. Most important force in changing attitudes to operational risk in early years of millennium was Basel II Accord. This obliged banks to set aside a specific risk capital for operational risk, right? So these are the factors causing the operational risk. So, right. So this is bit overlapping with this we have already discussed here. You can say formal definition of operational risk. The formal definition by regulators and the financial industry specifies and quantifies this capital charge within the accord. The operational risk is defined as the risk of loss resulting from inadequate or failed internal processes, people, systems, or from external events, right? So that is what the definition is, right? So that may include computer breakdowns, bug in a key piece of computer software, errors or judgment, deliberate fraud, other potential mishaps. This definition from Basel Committee includes legal risk, exposure to fines, penalties, punitive chain damages resulting from supervisory actions, as well as private settlement, but it excludes business risk and reputation risk and strategic risk. So this operational risk has, certain, as in the legal risk has a connotation with the this operational risk. Legal risk is legal risk falls under the operational risk, you can say, in a sense, the penalties and all those which fall under as per Basel norm, right? As per Basel committee, the legal risk which an enterprise has, that risk is clubbed with the operational risk, because that legal risk may have exposure to fines, penalties, punitive damages resulting from the supervisory action. Therefore, they have clubbed it under operation risk only. Okay, so management of operation risk, how are you going to manage it? So there are a certain principle which is more general in its nature, right? Board of directors should take the lead in establishing a strong risk management culture, ensure of its existing throughout the whole organization. Banks should develop, implement, maintain a framework that is fully integrated into banks' overall risk management processes. Board of directors should establish, approve, and review the framework and oversee senior management to ensure the policies, processes, and systems are implemented effectively at all decision levels. Board of directors should approve, review a risk appetite tolerance statement for operational risk that articulates the nature, types, and levels of operational risk that bank is willing to assume. Senior management should develop for approval by board of directors a clear, effective, robust governance structure with well-defined, transparent, and consistent lines of responsibility. Senior management should ensure the identification assessment of the operational risk inherent in all material products, activities, processes, systems to make sure the inherent risk and the incentives are well understood. Right. So this is these are the certain principles which are defined or proposed by a Basel committee. So these risk pertaining as in the operation risk needs to be managed by the enterprise, or rather I would say managed by the management by with the or with the help of the principles laid out. right? So with these principles which are there, the operational risk should be managed. And then we have few more here. Senior management should ensure there is an approval process for all new products, activities, processes, and systems that fully assesses operational risk. Senior management should implement a process to regularly monitor operational risk profiles and material exposure reporting mechanisms at the board, senior management, and business line levels. Banks should have a strong control environment that utilizes policies, processes, and systems, appropriate internal controls, and appropriate risk mitigation and transfer strategies. Banks should have business resiliency and continuity plans in place to ensure an ability to operate on an ongoing basis and limit the losses in the event of severe business disruption. Banks' public disclosure should allow stakeholders to assess its approach to operational risk management. Right, so it is more for management, top management of the enterprise to determine how they're going to manage. So these are the principles which are given by the Basel Committee. That is how the risk within an enterprise or a company should be contained or should be managed or mitigate. So that is defined with the help of these 11 principles which are there. Okay. Mitigating operational risk. Major banks have struggled to control operational risk, nearly 200 billion in operational risk losses since 2011. So that's a number given there. Since 2011, there has been such a huge loss, and the loss is to the tune of 210 billion, which is really big amount, right? So the key to effective operational risk management is training people to anticipate what could go wrong, especially when a business unit is about to do something new, right? So whenever you make a plan for a new operation, so the enterprise should also look into the various operational risks an operation may face as you continue set up the operation. You also need to look at what all risks surround that operation, and those should be defined and monitored on an ongoing basis to establish what level of threat or uncertainty is there, which can be a problematic for the whole enterprise or business as a whole. So that is what these key control or effective are meant to achieve, right? Mitigating operational risk, 4 areas to watch. So one is people, IT, organizational structure, regulation. Business banks that take a comprehensive approach to operational risk management recognize 4 broad areas that need attention. So what are those 4 areas? People, because when you think of mitigating operation risk, so these are the 4 areas where an enterprise has to focus on. One is your people, another is IT, another is organizational structure, and then the regulation. So if you as a enterprise can have a proper visibility and proper control mechanism around these 4 areas of concern, then the operation can be managed in a structured and in a well-defined manner. Okay. So operation risk, people. So when you look at, so the 4 items which are there, we are talking the first one, that's people, includes employees and customer they interact with. They can cause damage when they do things wrong, either by accident or on purpose. Intentional people can arise from problems can arise from intentional and illegal breaches of policy and rules, sloppy execution, lack of knowledge and training, unclear and sometimes contradictory procedures. Right. So I am sure like there is nothing such difficult to understand it. So these problems can, from the people point of view, right? Intentional illegal breaches of policy and rules. Sloppy execution means something is not processed correctly. Knowledge is not proper. Knowledge is not provided to the individuals who are going to manage or carrying out those activities. Unclear, sometimes contradictory procedures. So document which are having those procedures might not be fully clear, or maybe having certain details which are contradictory in the nature, or having more than one interpretation. So that can be a problem area for operation. IT, systems can be hacked and breached, data can be corrupted or stolen. Right? This can happen. So given everything is digital, so there are a set of people who always look for an opportunity to damage your IT system, or to take over, or to hack, or to steal data, to steal money from the other organization system. So that is the another threat or another risk is there. So the IT system should be relevant, should be strong enough to manage these modern challenges, because at one hand the IT is really a game changer, and at the other hand IT also throws few challenges wherein it can lead to a problems if the IT systems are not managed in a proper manner. So there could be many challenges. Those systems can be hacked. Those systems can be accessed by the wrong elements, or anti-social elements who can breach, who can take access to the data, and that could be a data breach. And further, it may have more ramification on various other aspects. Right, then you have organizational structure. Banks may engage in setting aggressive sales targets, rewarding employees for meeting the aggressive targets. So you remember I also talked about this given example, Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo Bank uh, did some of the same kind of activity wherein they set very aggressive sales target for their employees back in 2013 and 2013, yeah, 12, 13. So they wherein Wells Fargo's retail bank employee opened up account for the existing customer by fudging their document, by or by using the different names, or by using their social security number, and all those details were used to open up the account for them. Later it was found it was the employees themselves involved into opening up those accounts. So this kind of activity is against the code of conduct of the bank, one, and also it causes lot of other risks to the bank. Reputation is one of them, right? Because bank can severely create a distrust among its customer, and that can further hamper its its activity and its popularity among people. So bank needs to be uh, very clear in its priority, and they should be having reasonable target which are achievable, wherein people don't get involved something wrong with because of the pressure or the sales target. That is what is organizational structure is there. Then the regulation, understand regulation is always the one area which remains important. Since the global financial crisis, regulators have increased the number and the complexity of rules the banks must follow. Banks that operate in multiple jurisdiction can face overlapping, inconsistent, and conflicting regulatory regimes. So that example we covered uh, with the with the one of the example we talked about the SEBI increasing the margin, and also from the point of view of social media platforms which are available in India, so they need to go through a certain regulatory change. Same goes for the capital market or the financial market also, wherein they need to abide by those regulations which are formed and made by the regulator in the market. So every financial market or different jurisdiction may have its own regulations. So the firms or the companies operating in those jurisdiction, they need to abide by those regulations. If they don't do that, they are bound to face penalties and all those problems. So that's the risk which is there, and it needs to be mitigated with the help of abiding to those regulations. There is a case study that we have got here, which some of you might be aware about the Barings Bank. Maybe I would like you to read it out so that you. Okay, so maybe Narrative, maybe you can read it now. This slide.
Okay, sir. Okay. In 1992, Barings was appointed general manager of a new operation in futures markets on the Singapore International Monetary Exchange. Barings had held a seat on CIMEX for some time, but did not activate it until Leeson was sent over. Leeson was sent to Singapore after failing to deny a broker's license in the United Kingdom because of fraud on his application. Neither Leeson nor Barings disclosed this denial when Leeson applied for his license in Singapore. From 1992, Leeson made unauthorized speculative trades that at first made large profits for Barings. 10 million, which accounted for 10% of Barings' annual profit. He earned a bonus of uh, he earned a bonus of 1,30,000 on his salary of 50,000 for that year. So Leeson's luck soon went sour, and he used one of Baring's error accounts used to correct mistakes, used to hide his losses. The account was numbered 88888. Leeson claims that this account was first used to hide an error made by one of his colleagues rather than buy 20 contracts as the customer had ordered. She had sold them, costing Barings 20,000. Leeson used his account to cover further bad trades. He insists that he never used the account for his own gain. But in 1996, the New York Times quoted British press reports as claiming that investigators had located $35 million in various bank accounts tied to him.
Okay. So this Barings Bank, this was one of the um, very known bank back in 1992, and this trader who was Nick Leeson is his full name, right? So this trader was there in UK. Then he went on to do his trading activities in other Asian market like Singapore is mentioned there. So there he made profit by hiding his wrongdoings, right? So he made an account number 555 times 8, wherein he was hiding the losses and he was doing the accounting. This is all about the accounting uh, misaccounting, right? You're not accounting it properly. So misaccounting was done by him by using the account which he used, or you can say it was a secret account where he was hiding the trades which he was doing for his clients, and that was generating profit. At one side, he was showing profit. However, at the other side, he was having quite big losses, which he was trying to hide, but he was able to cover up those losses in one way or the other. But at a point, um, this could not be covered, and therefore it came in public, and it became known how this guy was doing all those trading and all activities and all. Right. So continuing with the same, there is another continuation. Okay, so let's the second slide. You can read this one.
Managers bank allowed Leeson to remain chief trader while
Hmm.
also being responsible for settling his trades, jobs usually done by two different people. This
Yeah.
made it much simpler for him to hide his losses for his superiors. By the end of 1992, the account's losses exceeded £2 million, which ballooned to £208 million by the end of 1994. The beginning of the end occurred on 16 January 1995 when Leeson placed a short straddle in the Singapore and Tokyo stock exchanges, essentially betting that the Japanese stock market would not move significantly overnight. The Kobe earthquake hit early in the morning on 17 January, sending Asian markets and Leeson's trading positions into a tailspin. Leeson attempted to recoup his losses by making a series of increasingly risky new trades, using a long future arbitrage, this time betting that the Nikkei stock average would make a rapid recovery. However, the recovery failed to materialize. Leeson left a note reading, "I am sorry," and fled Singapore on 23rd February. Losses eventually reached £7 million, around 1.4 billion US dollar, twice the bank's available trading capital. After a failed bailout attempt, Barings, which had been the United Kingdom's oldest merchant bank, was declared insolvent on 26 February.
Hmm. So this is the story. This is the entire, how this guy was. So look at this. 1992, the account losses exceeded $2 billion, and 1994, those those losses were in 208 million, and in 16th January, right? So 16th January, that was the end, beginning of the end occurred. 16 January 90, when the Leeson placed a short straddle in Singapore and Tokyo. So short straddle is a strategy in options market, and he shorted in option, right? So essentially betting the Japanese stock market would not move significantly overnight. That was his assumption. But earthquake came in January 17th, sending Asian market and Leeson's trading position into a tailspin. Leeson attempted to recoup his losses by making a series of increasingly risky new trades. Then he took the other way around trades. One at one side he was doing short, the other exchange he was doing a long trade, future trades, and that was basically to cover his losses on the other side. Recovery did not happen because it was
So
the
it's that movie Rogue Trader.
yeah, it's same. It is on the
Yeah.
rope trader. Yeah, he was the same
He
guy
was
that
doing
we.
average down,
Yeah, he was
like
doing.
adding to his losing position.
Yeah, and that point in time the controls were not that strong. So as you see, like he was the one chief trader. Also, he was executing trades. Also, he was doing accounting. Also, accounting means profit and loss was also being managed by him only. Ideally, the profit and loss team should be a different team, and this trading team should be a different team, and the traders and the profit and loss should not be done by the two same people. Then there are quite as in quite possibility of manipulation, which is the case that we're discussing here, right? So there are
If they authorize this, like the
yeah,
same person would be handling the reconciliation and also the trading desk.
yeah, yeah. So
Why
this
did they authorize this?
yeah. So the control isn't, when things started back then. So even if you go, every bank was not having that strong control because it requires money. It requires even if you look at IT infrastructure, IT infrastructure has really gone up to a great extent now in this modern time. But if you just go back 1992, India was all on paper, right? If you talk about India doing trading, it was all paper. There was no digital thing. So this control mechanism was there. I'm not saying it wasn't there at all, but there were loopholes. If you take your senior people into confidence, right, back then, so then you were having a long rope, so no one would be touching you because you are the favorite. You are the one who's making profit for the bank, right? If you look at the first slide that we read here, he was the trader who was really making profit, and he earned 1,30,000 as a bonus. That's as in double his salary, 2 months salary. No, that's as in, not the month. It was his package was 50,000 pounds, right? And his bonus was 1,30,000. So look at what an amazing bonus he was getting. And the
So
reason he was getting
initially,
it,
I think he was a good trader
he was a
before
good trader.
doing
He was
the
a good trader.
fraud.
Yeah. Hmm. Before doing the fraud, he was not doing it fraud intentionally. He was doing it to cover his losses, which he was doing because he as in, he did not have this thought of doing this intentionally. But when you are doing something wrong at doing wrong in the first place, probably you continue, because what happens, in order to recover, in order to cover your position, you continue to do something risky, and the risk uh, may turn out to be big risk if all of a sudden something additional comes. So the natural disaster, the earthquake which happened, that actually magnified those risk, and probably he could have recovered. No one could have known about those things which he did if that earthquake did not happen, because that way he would have probably not made that big loss, and maybe in the next day or two or a week, so he would have recovered the losses also. So that's a different situation, because you never know what the next day is going to bring to you. So therefore, uh, if you continue assuming, which happened in this particular case, he was sort of doing a bit of a speculative trading and going into risky deals and all. So that actually failed, and the bank lost. So you look at what is written there. So bank was not loss, eventually reached 820, twice the bank's available trading capital. So that means the bank was not even having the trading capital, and even he would have done a loss, as the leverage was such a huge that they had to file a bankruptcy, right? Because the bailout attempt did not work.
Now he is in jail,
No,
or he has been executed.
no. He was in. I guess he was in jail. Maybe I'm not very sure. But now he's a motivational trainer. He's a motivational coach. So I guess he was in jail for some years, but now he's out. Because
So
that, but
after making so much of losses, how can he be a motivational speaker?
yeah, that's an irony, right? That's an irony. But because the only thing is, it is not purely his fault, I would say. It's a fault of bank as a whole, right? So the reason he was able to execute all these things, you can't do such mischievous activity while you are having people money or your investors money. You cannot play with that money. That's very simple to understand. But he was able to do it because he had won the confidence of the senior people in the bank. and with that, the compliance team was not touching him, or even if he want, even if the compliance team wanted to touch him, he was having one excuse after another, and somewhere in the senior management was supporting it. So that was the cause. That was the cause of this whole failure, and it cannot be solely uh, be termed as a failure of a one individual. One individual was given a long rope. In a sense, he was not monitored. He was rather appreciated all the time for doing what he was doing, and what he was doing was not the thing supposed to be done by a trader, right? So that is something happened. So there are two more such case studies, rather three more, right? So you can read them. It is more of an information only. So I would like you to read it later. And with this, we conclude our final chapter, right? So let me just take your attendance, and then tomorrow we're going to have a revision class first, and then the second would be having on next Saturday, and then you would be having your mocks and all. Give me a second.
So in this mock, like, will we have the entire curriculum from
Yeah.
level 1, level 2, level 3, everything?
Yes, everything will be there, because this is the final one. So mock will cover as in level 1, level 2, level 3, everything will be covered there. So that is so that the is you prepare and be ready for your real interview. Yeah, there would be one. Yeah,
So
right, you're right. So there would be one
there's
written
one
test, which
more.
would be your,
Okay, written test
yeah. So
on the
that written
portal.
test on the portal only, right? So you would be doing it on the same day when I would be telling you, right? So because your time and everything would be captured, so the Amini will be telling you as in what time you're going to start it, um, and it will be maybe on Sunday. If we do it Sunday, then we'll see like or Saturday. I'll let you know how we are going to do that. Okay, so
And so, what
that is
about the
also
PPT?
which PPT?
PPT.
PPT as in, oh, you're saying a presentation. Those who
Yes, sir.
did not. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, I forgot it. So yeah, I'll have to check for your presentation also for those who did not appear for the presentation. I'll let you know. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
The last,
And the mock will happen on the Sunday only. Mock 2 and mock 3.
yeah, mock 2, mock 3 will happen on Sunday. Yeah.
Okay.
So and written test will also happen on Sunday.
A written test, it'll take only 1 hour, so we'll do it on Saturday. We'll have a 4-hour class on Saturday. So one would be your, for your mock, oh sorry, for this written test, and 3 hour would be so you would say you will start with your written test first hour, and then subsequent would be followed by your revision class.
So return test will be happen on Saturday.
Saturday, yeah.
The revision should happen before the written test, right?
Yeah, revision, but this would be more from your level 1. So level 1 and level 2 both would be there. So we can do what we can do. Either way, I'm fine with that. So you can revision. The first class is tomorrow, right? Then the second class would be on Saturday, and after we are through with the revision, right, both days, then you can go for the written test. We can do this way if you're comfortable with that, everyone, because we can also do that way.
So one more thing, sir, I have gained access to the portal, but I have seen that my attendance is low, but I guess I have missed only a few days. The
Your attendance is low. Okay.
it's showing like in the rating section, it's showing that I have low attendance, but I think that I have been present most of the days except 2 days
Yeah,
or maybe 3 days. Maximum I have been absent for, I guess, 3 days or 2 days. So,
yeah. I think in
can
your
you
case,
please
the
rectify
attendance.
that?
Yeah, no worries. So probably I you can maybe I would ask Kamini to look at this file, right? So that it can be corrected there. In case I'm not sure where they are taking that data from. If they are taking it from this file only, so then uh, how and what as in how that is being calculated. So something need to look at. But I believe if there is some issues, look at this file. The file is having all data, right? So that way, don't worry about it. It would be sorted. It will be sorted because it will be looked at from the file only. Rishabh is there.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Anjali is there. Tarun is not there. Lavesh is there. Kuldeep absent. Chirag absent. Gaurav is there. Shatmanu is not there, right? Shatmanu is absent. Oh, okay. Ayushi is there. Narithya is there. Pranav is there. Mahendra is there. Siddharth is there. Apurva is there. Okay, so let me just call your names, as in call your people who are present. So Rahul is there. Nipun is there, right? Rishabh is there. Anjali is there. Lavesh is there. Then Gaurav is there. Ayushi is there, Naritya is there, Pranav is there, Mahendra is there, Siddharth is there, and Apurva. Anyone whose name I missed? All done, right? Apurva is asking a question, sir, would there be HR related questions? Yeah, it can, it may be. You need to be prepared for everything. HR, though I don't ask much of HR stuff, it would be as in more would be from the technical point of view only, but it may one or two questions can be there, but don't worry about it. HR का ऐसे कुछ वो नहीं है, मेन तो आपको टेक्निकल साइड में ध्यान देना है. Okay, so with this we are done. Okay, so let us as in let us meet tomorrow to cover revision and we'll see then. Okay guys, so any question before we close it for today? Any other question?
No, sir.
Oh,
So, is this
okay. So
Basin chapter very important? I find it
which one?
really boring, sir. Basel 1, 2, 3, and then MIFID that.
Yeah, the
Yes,
regulations
sir.
are important, I would say, because regulations, at times you can find real into. The basal law is very important one. Method is also important. Method is also important. Basal is very relevant. Basal is very relevant. Basal, I would say, is important. Okay, so basal is important, right? And method is also important. Fine.
Yes.
Okay, guys. So let's meet tomorrow. We'll do revision and everything. And okay, guys. Bye. Take care.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir. Take care.